All right, so I'll go over as many questions as you guys want. If you don't have questions, then I'll just give you more time to work. But if there are some things that we want to discuss, we'll go through them. Question number 9, there was one like this on your quiz, and several of you had problems with it because of the i's. So I asked you to find the remaining zeros. Now, if you're finding all the zeros, worst case scenario, could you ignore the fact that I told you 2i and go back and do it like you did problem 6 and problem 8? Can you find p's, q's, possible zeros? Yes. So if you are really struggling with the synthetic division with the I, you could ignore that and go back to your p's, q's, possible zeros and start it from there. But if we deal with the 2i, I've told you it's a 0, so we can do synthetic division. Our coefficients are 1, -4, 4, and -16. So 1 comes down. Multiply, then add. So 1 times 2i is 2i. When I add, this is just -4 plus 2i because they are not like terms. Multiply. So I'm taking 2i times my -4 plus 2i. If we distribute, that's -8i plus 4i squared. But what is I squared equal to? -1. So this is just -8i minus 4. When you add those together, the 4 and the -4 cancel. We get -8i. So 2i times -8i is -16i squared. That means -16 times -1, which is positive 16. Add those up and we get 0. On the quiz, a couple of you messed up your division and then just magically put a 0 here. That actually does not help you at all. It shows that you know you should have a 0, but what do I have to do from here?
You have to use the -2.
Right. And if this is wrong, and you just magically put a 0, can you divide it by -2i? No.
You might as well just stop.
You might as well just stop. Yeah. Go back and try it again. Or go to p's, q's, possible zeros. But don't just magically fudge the final answer. It does not help you. So we know imaginary zeros come in pairs. So -2i has to work. So we bring down the coefficients we just got. Except for the 0, because that was the remainder. So 1 comes down. 1 times -2i is -2i. When I add, those i's drop and we get -4. -4 times -2i is positive 8i, and we add, that gives us 0. So this is x minus 4. The question was the remaining zeros. Alright, I already gave you 2i, so you don't have to tell me that one again. But we found out -2i worked. And what makes x minus 4 equal 0? Positive 4. So again, I didn't list 2i because I just asked for the remaining zeros, not all the zeros.
I minus 2i. What? How do you have the I minus 2i?
This is it. All right. What else would you guys like for me to work out from this study guide? I am happy to work any of these questions that you want to see. Number 8. A, B, do we have a preference? Okay. Let's look at, I'll do 8B, and then if I need to go back and do A, we can. Questions like 6 and 8. These are worth a lot of points. Probably at least 8 to 12 points on the test, depending on if it's like an x cubed or an x to the 4th to start with. So you need to know what you are doing on these. Both questions 6 and 8 start out the same way. I'm asking you to find the zeros. Is this one that I could just factor and know my zeros? No. So what do we do? Okay, but how do I know what numbers work? What do I have? Right. So we have to have our possible zeros, and then we're plugging them in to find one that makes it equal 0. So we have to do P, Q, possible zeros. Right. My P value comes from the constant. What is everything that divides 18 evenly? Q, leading coefficient. So the number in front of x to the 4th. This is just like a 1x to the 4th. What goes into 1 evenly? So my possible zeros, that's P divided by Q. So 1 over 1. 18 over 1. 2 over 1. 9 over 1. 3 over 1. 6 over 1. Does everyone know how to get this list? So anytime I ask you to find the zeros and you cannot factor, this is where you have to start. Now, like you guys were saying, you have to find one that works. And it works if you plug it into the original polynomial and it equals 0. So find me one that works. My guess is it's going to have to be a negative number here, because if you look, all these are addition.
Oh, no.
Which one works?
-3.
-3. Let's do that. So then we do our synthetic. One comes down. 1 times -3 is -3. 6 plus -3 is 3. 9 plus 11 is 2. 6 plus 12 is 6. 18 plus 18 is 0. When you divide, your power always goes down by 1. This is my x to the 4th. So now I have x cubed minus 3x squared plus 2x plus 6. Where are you going to go from here?
Grouping.
You have 2 options. If you catch it, grouping works here. If you don't, what do you have to do? Yep, find another 0 that works and do it again.
Shouldn't the 3 squared negative 5?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So if you were doing it again, I think -3 works the second time. So you could divide by -3 again, or you could do grouping here, either way. Plus 3 is 0. 1, 2, -6 and 0. So it's my remainder constant x and x squared. So I have x squared plus 2. My directions ask for 2 things. The zeros and the factored form. Zeros are, if you set this equal to 0, what do we get? So the x squared equals -2. Square root plus and minus. What's the square root of -2? I radical 2. What else were my zeros? So it was just 2 -3, so I can say. My factored form, I would accept a couple of different things. If you said x squared plus 2 and x plus 3 squared, I would take that. Or if you did it with the i's. So you could say x minus I radical 2, x plus I radical 2, x plus 3 squared. So factored form, I would take either of those. Factors have the x's, zeros are just the number. So 8a is going to be like this one. I know I helped several people with this one yesterday, so maybe it wouldn't hurt us to refresh. It's different than A and C because it's not factored yet. And so I'll probably do that on the test. I'll probably give you a couple of these polynomials to graph, one of them where it is factored and one of them where it's not. Degree, I can find by this. If it's just added and subtracted, we take the highest power. So my degree is 3. In behavior, what does that mean?
Way the graph moves.
Mm-hmm.
Head down, up.
Right. If it's odd, it looks like a chair, down, up. We have problems when we are asked to find our zeros. And on that quiz, several of you got into trouble when I asked for those zeros because you can't look at this and know them. But what can I do? So, if it's just a plain x, that's 0. Since it's squared, that means multiplicity of 2. And x minus 4, that would be 4. Bounce or through. If your multiplicity is even, you will bounce. If your multiplicity is odd, we go y-intercept. If you plug in 0 for all of your x's, what do we get out? So graph this, we get at 0 and 4. We start down here, we bounce at 0, come down, hit 4 and go through, and it matches my end behavior. So on those polynomials, if it's not factored, you have to factor it in order to get the zeros. What else?
Second, I forgot how to do it.
All right, so number 12. I gave you a graph. And we have some information from that. All right, so when I'm looking at this, I'm asking you to write the equation from this. Can you tell me what kind of degree is it going to have? Third power. Okay, so my polynomial. When I look, it hits the x-axis. Whoops, I drew my graph wrong. It's supposed to be at -2, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you hit at -2, what has to be in your factored form? It has to have an x plus 2, because -2 is a 0, and since it bounced, that means it would be to the second power. So that's 2 of my 3 zeros. If you're following along here, I'll probably have you do one of these on your test. The next place it hits the x-axis is 3, so that means what would be in my factored form? Okay. The only other thing we have is the y-intercept. And we've talked about the only thing that we could do is add a number out in front. So the y-intercept is saying if x is 0, so if I put in 0 for all my x's, this whole thing has to equal what y value? So if I work this out, I get -12a equals -3. Divide by -12, so a is 1/4. So my final polynomial, we can find that number in front. It's 1/4 x plus 2 squared, x minus 3.
Does that count as a polynomial, or?
Yes, you don't
you
have to.
times it all out?
No, it's just a polynomial in factored form. So could you do that on your test? Write the polynomial from the graph? You guys know your tests are always very similar to your study guides, so you should have a pretty good idea of what this test is going to look like right now. Question 11. I'm asking you to use the graph to answer some questions. And when I look at this graph, okay, so it's something like this. Tells us this point is AB. So, part A is the minimum degree. Can you tell me, does this have an even or an odd power? Even. It has 3 turning points, so my degree would have to be 4. Degree is 1 bigger than your turning points. Your local min doesn't have to be the lowest on the entire graph, but any point that's lower than surrounding points. What would that be? MN. C, your local max. Any points that are higher than surrounding points. Absolute min. Is there a lowest point on this entire graph? Yeah, it just keeps going down. So there's no single point, so we just say none. Absolute max. Is there a single highest point on this graph? Domain. As this keeps going, it just keeps spreading out to negative infinity to positive infinity. And the range from the bottom up, so it's coming from negative infinity. It stops right here. What is the y value there?